I wanted to burn, forget, drown in him. My hand slipped under his pants to explore the geometry and strength of his beast, and that's when I touched his bow, pot and ready to release an arrow. He moved so much, as if he wanted to tear through the fabric. I couldn't wait any longer. I knelt before him and grasped his bow with a firm hand. He looked at me and said, "Go ahead, baby." My eager lips moved closer, and my breathing grew heavier as I let myself be consumed by a deep, unspoken desire. My name is Emily. I was trapped in a passionless marriage. My husband had money but no love. He wanted a child, but he's sterile. So I had to lie to find the freedom I wanted. But how far was I prepared to go to hide this lie that was getting heavier and heavier? This is my story. It was an autumn evening. Nathan was returning from a business trip outside the city. I had dined alone, as usual, and had prepared myself for another night of solitude. Then the phone rang. "Mrs. Marion?" began a deep voice on the other end of the line. A shiver ran through me. Yes. I am Dr. Lemoyne. Your husband has been in a car accident. My breath caught. An accident? Is he okay? He is alive, but he has been seriously injured. I don't remember much of what happened next. Everything became blurry. I vaguely heard the details: a wet road, excessive speed, a violent collision. When I arrived at the hospital, Nathan was unrecognizable. His face was bruised, his arm in a cast, and his legs motionless under the white sheet. The following weeks were a trial. Nathan had survived, but he would never be the same again. With his spinal cord injured, he was now paralyzed from the waist down. He hardly spoke. He no longer looked at me. He spent his days locked in his office, managing his affairs remotely, and refused any help. I was there, silent, trying to exist beside this man who seemed to have abandoned any desire to live. "You should go out more often," he said to me one day, without looking at me. His voice was distant, as if he were speaking to a stranger. "Why?" I asked. "Because you are young, and I." He stopped, clenched his jaw, and turned his gaze to the window. I said nothing. I wanted to tell him that I was there for him, that I didn't intend to abandon him. But was I even capable of that? That evening, as I looked at myself in the mirror, a thought crossed my mind: did I still have the right to hope for something other than this life? A life that now seemed to be fading away with him. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and soon, a year passed in stifling monotony. The house, already silent before the accident, became a true mausoleum. Nathan buried himself in his work, unable to accept his condition, and I wandered like a lost soul between these walls that were too vast, too cold. I woke up alone. I dined alone. I went to bed alone. Nathan was no longer my husband, just a ghost living under the same roof. He only spoke to me for practical necessities, and even those rare exchanges were devoid of emotion. Then, one evening, he broke the silence in an unexpected way. "Emily." His voice startled me. He was sitting in his chair, facing the fireplace, his gaze lost in the flames. "Yes." He turned his head slightly toward me, his face expressionless. "We need to have a child." I froze. "A child?" I repeated, as if the word itself no longer had any meaning. He nodded. An heir. It's important. I let out a nervous laugh. He wasn't talking about a child. He was talking about an heir, as if it were an investment, a legacy in his name, a proof of his existence despite his paralysis. Nathan, how do you expect us to? I hadn't even finished my sentence when he answered abruptly. Artificial insemination. His words fell like a stone. He didn't even try to touch me, to recreate a semblance of intimacy between us. He just wanted to carry on his name. Then he added, "This is not a choice, Emily. It's a necessity." I lowered my eyes, my heart heavy. Was this all I had become? A mere vessel to secure his lineage? I felt anger rising inside me, a deep frustration I had never dared to express. "I will arrange everything," he continued in a neutral tone. "I know a specialist." I lifted my head and replied coldly, "A specialist?" He added, "Dr. Carter. He is a fertility expert. He will help us." I had never heard that name before. But that night, unknowingly, Nathan had just changed my destiny. Because Oliver Carter was about to enter my life. And nothing would ever be the same again. 2 days later, I found myself sitting in the waiting room of a private medical office, a sober and elegant place with pristine white walls. The air was filled with the smell of disinfectant mixed with a slight hint of polished wood. Nathan had arranged everything without consulting me further. I was simply expected to follow the protocol, sign papers, and submit to a clinical procedure, as if it were a foregone conclusion. My gaze lingered on the name displayed in golden letters on the office door, Dr. Oliver Carter, Reproductive Medicine and Fertility. I sighed and lowered my eyes to my hands clasped on my lap. Why did I feel like I was betraying something by being here? Perhaps because this decision had not come from me. Perhaps because, for the first time, I realized just how much my life no longer belonged to me. "Mrs. Marion?" I abruptly lifted my head. The voice was deep, steady, with an unexpected touch of gentleness. And that was how I saw him for the first time. Dr. Oliver Carter stood before me, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly fitted white coat. But it was neither his stature nor his appearance that unsettled me immediately. It was his gaze. His deep gray eyes seemed to search souls. He looked at me with a calm intensity, almost intriguing, as if he already sensed my unease. "You may come in." I stood up, slightly unsettled, and followed him into his office. The room was spacious, bathed in natural light from a large bay window overlooking a garden. He pointed to a chair in front of his desk, then sat down, watching me attentively. "So, Mrs. Marion." He opened a file and skimmed through the first lines before lifting his eyes back to me. "Emily," I corrected instinctively. A slight smile crossed his lips. "Emily," he repeated slowly. I felt a strange warmth spread through me as I heard him say my name. "I know this process can be delicate," he continued in a professional tone. "Do you have any questions before we begin?" A storm of thoughts swirled inside me. Yes, I had questions. Too many questions ran through my mind, but I didn't ask them. Why did I have to do this? Why did my husband no longer see me as a woman but only as a potential mother for his heir? Why was I here, facing this man, with this strange feeling that something had just shifted? I cleared my throat, uncomfortable. I suppose you've handled cases like mine before? He tilted his head slightly. Every case is unique. But what I can tell you, Emily, is that this decision should be yours. I abruptly lifted my gaze to him. It was the first time in months that someone reminded me that I still had a choice. I left Dr. Carter's office with a strange sensation in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just the anxiety of what this insemination entailed, nor even the discomfort of discussing such an intimate topic with a stranger. No, it was something else. His gaze. His voice. The way he had pronounced my name, as if savoring each syllable. I almost hated myself for thinking about it. But the truth was undeniable. Oliver Carter had awakened something in me that I thought was dead. A shiver. A stir. A reminder of what it felt like to be seen as a woman, not just as an instrument for lineage. Nathan had little interest in the details of the process. He simply asked me briefly, "Everything went well with Carter?" "Yes," I replied without going into detail. "Perfect. Make sure everything is done quickly." And that was it. He didn't ask how I felt. He didn't even try to find out if I agreed. I was just a cog in his family machinery, a project to be completed. But I was beginning to see things differently. When I returned to Dr. Carter's office, my heart beat faster than I wanted. He greeted me with the same discreet smile, his gaze as piercing as ever. "Emily, I'm happy to see you again." I struggled to hold his gaze. Why did I feel like he could see through me? "Hello, Doctor." "Oliver," he corrected softly. I swallowed. That small detail, that invitation to familiarity, was a transgression in itself. We went over the initial tests, the medical exams I had undergone. He spoke about the procedure with professionalism, but I struggled to focus. "You seem distracted," he observed at one point. I tensed. "No, it's just a lot to handle." He set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "Emily, are you sure you want to do this?" I lowered my gaze. "Nathan wants a child," I murmured. I didn't ask what Nathan wanted. My heart skipped a beat. The air in the room felt heavier. I timidly lifted my gaze to him, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that went beyond mere kindness. Interest. Curiosity. And perhaps, the beginning of desire. In that instant, I knew I was crossing a line. A line that, once passed, would change my life forever. The days following that meeting were filled with growing turmoil. Every time I thought of Dr. Carter, no, of Oliver, a dull heat spread through me. It was no longer just curiosity, it was a budding obsession. I had to forget him. I had to stay true to my role, to my duty. But something inside me was rebelling. A week after our last meeting, I received a call. "Emily?" I immediately recognized his voice. Deep. Soothing. A little too intimate. Yes. I'd like to see you again before we continue the procedure. There are things we need to discuss in private. I frowned. In private? Outside the medical setting. I think it would do you good. My breath hitched slightly. What he was suggesting was dangerous, but a part of me wanted it. Where? Tomorrow evening. I'll send you the address of a discreet place. You can decide at the last moment whether you want to come or not. He hung up before I could answer. I was trapped in a choice that wasn't really one. I spent the day battling my own mind. I knew I shouldn't go. But as night fell, I got into my car and followed the address he had sent me. A discreet restaurant on the outskirts of the city. Elegant, but without ostentation. He was already there, sitting at a table near a bay window, dressed in a dark shirt that contrasted with the dim light of the place. When he lifted his eyes and met my gaze, a shiver ran through me. He stood up slowly, a slight smile on his lips. You came. I sat across from him, my heart pounding too fast. Why am I here? I asked, as if I still had control. He didn't answer immediately. He studied me carefully, as if trying to read me, to guess how far I was willing to go. Then, slowly, he leaned slightly forward and murmured, "Because you wanted to." My breath quickened. There was no escape anymore. And I knew that, whatever happened tonight, nothing would ever be the same again. The tension was palpable. We were alone at our table, but it felt like everything around us was fading away. Oliver looked at me with that unsettling intensity, and every fiber of my being screamed at me to flee or to give in. I took a sip of wine, trying to steady myself. So? I asked, trying to sound indifferent. What did you want to tell me? A faint smile crossed his lips. I wanted to know how you really feel, Emily. If you're making this choice for yourself, or only for Nathan. It's not that simple, I retorted, staring at my glass. But it is, he replied gently. The only thing that matters is what you want. His voice was a trap. A promise. I lifted my gaze to him. And what if I don't know what I want? Oliver leaned back in his chair, watching me like a patient predator. Then maybe you just need someone to help you figure it out. My heart skipped a beat. I knew what he was implying. And what terrified me wasn't his boldness, but my own reaction. I wanted him to help me. I wanted to forget everything that chained me to this life that no longer felt like mine. And I knew that with him, I could lose myself in a way I had never known before. After dinner, we stepped out into the cool night air. My breath formed a fine mist, but it wasn't the cold that made me tremble. Oliver stopped near my car and turned to me. Are you sure you want to go home tonight? He didn't need to elaborate. I felt a dull heat spread through me, a fire I hadn't felt in a long time. It was an invitation. A choice. The last moment I could still turn back. I lifted my eyes to him, and in that gray gaze, I saw something I had never found in Nathan. A promise of surrender, an escape from the invisible chains that had trapped me. My hand trembled slightly as I opened my car door. Good night, Oliver, I murmured. He didn't move. He let me go. But before I got in, he murmured softly, "This is only the beginning, Emily." And I knew he was right. I had just opened a door that I would never be able to close again. The days following that dinner were tormenting. I tried to convince myself that nothing had changed, that I was still the same woman, faithful to my marriage and commitments. Yet every night, as I lay in that cold and empty bed, my mind betrayed me. I saw his gaze again, I heard his voice, I could almost feel the warmth of his presence near me. I hated myself for thinking about it. But the more I tried to forget him, the more he consumed my thoughts. The next appointment came sooner than I had expected. I got ready with a care I didn't want to acknowledge. A slightly more fitted blouse, a dab of perfume behind my ear, a bolder lipstick than usual. I tried to convince myself it was just a medical appointment. But deep down, I knew it was a lie. When I arrived at the office, Oliver was already there, leaning against his desk. He was wearing a white shirt with the sleeves slightly rolled up, and that simple sight was enough to awaken an uncontrollable warmth in me. "Emily," he said with that slight smile that unsettled me so much. I sat down across from him, trying to appear natural. "We are going to finalize the last steps before the procedure," he announced in a professional tone. He outlined the next steps, but I only heard half of his words. I could only focus on his closeness, the way his fingers brushed the papers in front of him, the curve of his jaw when he lifted his head toward me. Then, he paused. "Emily, are you okay?" I blinked, suddenly pulled back to reality. Yes, of course. "You seem distracted." He didn't take his eyes off me. The space between us suddenly felt too small, the air too heavy. I opened my mouth to respond, but instead of words, a tense silence settled between us. Then, without warning, he stood up and slowly walked around the desk. My heart raced. He stopped just inches from me, close enough that I could smell his scent, that woody, intoxicating fragrance that made me lose my footing. "Emily," he whispered. I lifted my gaze to him, and in that moment, I understood, we had passed the point of no return. He raised a hand and gently brushed my arm. A simple touch, yet electrifying. I shivered under his touch, unable to move, unable to resist. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. But no words left my lips. Because I didn't want him to stop. Because, for the first time in years, I felt alive. His breath was close, his gaze locked onto mine, as if he were waiting for a sign. A refusal. A permission. But I said nothing. Because deep down, every part of me was already screaming the answer. I wanted to feel his lips on mine, to forget who I was, where I was, and simply exist in the warmth he awakened in me. And then, slowly, he closed the last inch between us. His lips brushed against mine in an unbearable softness, a kiss barely traced yet already burning. I closed my eyes. It was a trap, I knew it. But I surrendered to it. His hands slid along my arms, his fingers tracing shivers on my skin. He wasn't rushing. He let me feel every sensation, every rapid heartbeat. When he deepened the kiss, a shiver ran through my entire body. His taste, his scent, the warmth of his body so close to mine. It all enveloped me, pulling me into a whirlwind of emotions I could no longer control. One of his hands rested on my waist, gently drawing me toward him. My body responded before my mind, instinctively seeking that closeness, that forbidden contact I hadn't known in so long. And that's when reality hit me. Nathan. My marriage. Everything I was about to betray. I pulled away abruptly, breathless, my heart racing. I can't, I stammered, avoiding his gaze. Oliver didn't move immediately. His gaze was dark, intense, but he slowly nodded. I understand, he murmured. But there was no anger in his voice. No frustration. Only a silent certainty. He knew. He knew this was only the beginning. And deep down, I knew it too. Because no matter how hard I tried to convince myself otherwise, I had already given in. The following days were torture. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his gaze again, felt the burning of his lips against mine. My body remembered, even as my mind tried to fight it. I threw myself into my responsibilities with Nathan, hoping that routine would be enough to suffocate me, to numb me. But it was useless. Every night, lying alone in our massive bed, I felt that suffocating emptiness, that loneliness pressing on my shoulders like a sentence. And Oliver haunted my thoughts. A week passed without me seeing him. I avoided his office, finding excuses to postpone the final appointment. But Oliver wasn't a man to wait indefinitely. One evening, as I was returning home after visiting a friend, I found him standing in front of my house, leaning against his car. My heart skipped a beat. He was wearing a dark, slightly wrinkled shirt, and the shadow of the streetlights accentuated the sharpness of his features. He wasn't waiting for an invitation. He already knew I would come to him. And that's exactly what I did. I stopped a few steps away, unable to look away. "Emily," he whispered, his voice low and rough. I didn't answer. Because there was nothing left to say. He extended his hand. And this time, I didn't resist. I slid my fingers into his, and he held them with a gentleness that sent a shiver through me. Then he pulled me softly against him. His breath brushed my cheek, and a shiver ran through me as he whispered in my ear. "Tell me to stop, now, or it will be too late." I closed my eyes. I knew what it meant. But instead of pulling away, I pressed closer against him. "No, Carter, take me to your place instead." That was all he had been waiting for. He quickly opened the car door, and I got in. The drive to his apartment was filled with electric silence. I should have felt guilt, fear, hesitation. But all I felt was a need. An uncontrollable, insatiable desire that had been dormant in me for far too long. No sooner had the door closed than he slammed me against the wall, ripping off my clothes in a second, my wet panties falling to the floor. My heart was beating even faster. His eyes searched for any sign of hesitation, but there was none. He lifted me effortlessly, carrying me to his bedroom. The outside world ceased to exist. My past, my regrets, my marriage, none of it mattered in that instant. The only thing that counted was him, the warmth of his body, the fire he had awakened in me. I wanted to burn, forget, drown in him. My hand slipped under his pants to explore the geometry and strength of his beast, and that's when I touched his bow, jackpot and ready to release an arrow. He moved so much, as if he wanted to tear through the fabric. I couldn't wait any longer. I knelt before him and grasped his bow with a firm hand. He looked at me and said, "Go ahead, baby." My eager lips moved closer, and my breathing grew heavier as I let myself be consumed by a deep, unspoken desire. The room was bathed in dim light, casting moving shadows of my kneeling body onto the walls. Oliver watched me with a burning intensity, his dark pupils dilated with the desire to tear me apart. I felt the tension vibrate between us, that unbearable anticipation electrifying every second. "Stand up," he murmured in a husky voice. A shiver ran through me. His tone left no room for doubt. He wanted to see me surrender, to completely give myself to him. Slowly, I obeyed him. He pressed me against the cold wall again, one hand on my neck as if he wanted to choke me, the other holding my left leg suspended in the air, exposing my vulnerability. I couldn't move anymore. The way he placed his hands on me, it felt like I was a punished slave and he, my cruel master. I couldn't say no to him, because my body wanted even more. My heart pounded wildly. His warm breath brushed against my ear. "Let me take over, your body is mine now." His voice was a caress, a promise. And when he finally joined me, a wave of intense heat consumed me. I let out a moan. Every movement was controlled, calculated to push me to the edge of what I could bear. He wasn't just trying to possess me, he wanted me to lose myself in him, to feel every moment, every sensation until I was intoxicated. When he quickened his pace, I couldn't hold back a cry. "More," he murmured against my skin. And I gave him everything. Every sigh, every tremor, every shiver. The room echoed with our passion, this feverish dance where he led every movement, every quiver. I was suspended between surrender and madness. And when the wave finally overtook us, it was a blinding flash of light, a delicious dizziness that left us gasping, clinging to each other as if we could never let go. A long silence stretched between us, broken only by our ragged breaths. Then Oliver leaned in and placed a kiss on my shoulder, soft, almost tender, in contrast to the intensity of the moment. "You are mine," he whispered. I closed my eyes. Because in that moment, I knew it was true. The echo of our breathing still filled the room, the silence heavy with what had just happened. My body was numb from the fever of our embrace, my mind clouded by the lingering ecstasy beneath my skin. But reality came back too quickly. My phone vibrated on the bedside table, shattering the fragile balance between us. My stomach twisted when I saw Nathan's name appear on the screen. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I hesitated before answering, my voice uncertain. "Hello?" Nathan's voice was sharp, suspicious. "Where are you?" My throat tightened. The clock read 11:45 p.m. I had no excuse, no explanation that would make sense. Panic rose inside me. I couldn't tell him the truth. My mind raced. My lips parted before I could think, and the words escaped in a desperate whisper. I had an accident." A heavy silence settled. Then Nathan's voice rang out, low and menacing. "What did you just say?" My heart pounded wildly. What had I